Do you like being compared? Well, I know I don't. I have been speaking with a ton of people over the past few months, and there has been one consistent theme that I have been pulling out of a lot of the conversations. And that is there is a deep seated need in our culture to compare anyone and everyone with everything and anything. It's astonishing. I was talking to a pastor the other day. He has had a church. He's been pastoring for some time now, and decades worth. And people at conferences and around, whenever he travels, always say, "So, how many people go to your church? Or are your numbers growing?" There's always this theme about growing and growing, and needing to fixate on numbers and analytics and statistics, and we just live in such a high statistical culture that is just, I think, sucking us dry of relationship. I hear it with parents and the way they're able to connect with other parents, and sadly it's not that it's not that the connections aren't there. It's just most of the time it's going off of comparison. And at some point, it just kind of slides in. Even with some of the friends we've had over the years, they just need to compare. And I know that there's a lot of people that are not Christian, who, or grew up in a non-Christian home, and that was the only thing they knew. But, as they're Christians now, or they're becoming Christians or stronger Christians, you'd think that they would start uplifting one another, not comparing. But it's just so ingrained in our world, in our mindset, to compare, compare, compare. You see it in sports. And don't get me wrong, I'm not the guy who's going to be handing out orange slices when the kids are 8 or 10 years old. They've got to learn how to lose. They've got to learn that there are consequences for the things that they do. I'm all for that. But it is the unneeded comparison. It's the drive for a certain level of success. And I don't know who made this thing the standard. We as humans are so unique. There are obviously cultural norms, and there's nothing new under the sun, as King Solomon says. But we are very, very unique creations that God has made. And I think we need to really latch onto that and take hold of that. And in a world now where social media determines a lot of how we think, how we pivot, how we make decisions, how we buy. Just for instance, start talking about something, a word or something you've never talked about before, and watch the ads on YouTube or Google start popping out of nowhere. Just because there is stuff that is consistently listening in, trying to build an algorithm, put a world view in front of you because of these little magic rectangles that we have in front of us these days. It doesn't just go outside the church and end up in conversation. The amount of times that I've heard mothers with these babies, and they're comparing, what they did, the milestones they're hitting, and instead of encouraging one another, there's this like arrogance or smug, or there's this shame that my child hasn't hit this certain milestone, or hasn't hit this this type of criteria, or doesn't go to an extra language class, or blah 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 blah, when that child most likely needs you to just spend some good old quality time with them. It really, I honestly, I must say, it angers me. The people whom I've worked with for years, talking about the vacations they're going to take, instead of thinking about maybe there's people who are struggling to buy food. There's people who are struggling to make rent. There's people who may be homeless, or moving into that realm of homelessness. I really think this comparison thing has gone on long enough, and we, especially as Christians, need to make a stand against that, to uplift the people around us, to break down those barriers that are put in to literally divide us from having the most unity possible. I was also thinking about even people who were very mature in their faith. I remember growing up and serving and helping alongside some of those titans of faith. And here I was, I remember one time I was at a kind of a chalet. I was just so blessed by these same men who, were being kind to me and caring for me, but they were spending, just like an hour with this kid who was, struggling, who was I was in the food, we were going to the food banks at the time. We were just struggling in so many ways. And these guys are talking about, the cottages they have and the multiple properties they have. And I'm just like, the unbelievable, not insensitivity, but just lack of awareness. Talk about it all you want. I'm happy. I'm actually thrilled if you can afford to buy a cottage and have these wonderful things in your life. That's wonderful. But at least know, who you're talking to and the people that are around you. And it is just such a lost art to have any form of sensitivity or understanding or knowing your audience. It's unbelievable. I was talking to another one of my friends who, who's struggling with job loss, and he was just too afraid to tell the people in his quote unquote life group, in his the group that he was, doing life with, that he had lost his job, because a lot of the time all they do is talk about the achievements they have or what they're doing to push their kids forward. And he's on the brink of pulling his children out of things, and he was just too afraid to even mention what he was going to lose. The comparison game wins again. And what if if you've watched the channel before, one of the phrases that I constantly use is that comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. When we compare that way, we are literally stripping ourselves of relationship, of tidings of good joy, of going deeper with someone, just because of the comparing spirit. Like if you're really around someone who loves you and who cares for you, they'll actually be super happy, that something wonderful has gone on in your life. But there's a big difference between being supportive and happy for someone and like what it feels like at times to people rubbing it in their face. That's where the problem lies. And going now back to the way that this affects people in general, not only in the adult realm but in the children realm, is that it causes this deep anxiety to be rooted from the seed of comparison. And so at a young age, if you think about it, you have these kids, a lot of these kids that I know that are in affluent families, they're taking a second or third language. They're in math tutoring. They're trying to get to the top of their class. And if people were to actually just take a step back and think about the most successful careers and successful people who work mainstream successful jobs, in a lot of these countries, there are high suicide rates. There are high addiction rates. There are people who are falling into horrible, horrible situations because from a young age, they were not regulated properly. They were not told that it's okay to play. They were not told that it's okay to learn and to grow and to think and to just be. There is also, statistically speaking, children who have the opportunity to play have a growth chart ratio of fulfillment to work-life benefit if they have a good balance. And when you don't have that good balance, you're teetering on either side of having real stressful problems as you grow and as you mature into adulthood. I've just seen so many kids that are so wrapped up in getting the high marks, their anxiety goes through the roof. It's sadly the way our communities are now built in many ways. Like even you look at Toronto, the rent is so high, the traffic is so bad, the food quality and choices there a lot of the times are very poor. The messaging is brutal. And it spawns not from, it's this generation or whatever it might be, or it's the internet or whatever. It's generations of putting so much pressure on their families to succeed. And don't get me wrong, I have no idea what it's like to come from a third world country and try to make it in this country. I don't know. I have no clue. I know what it's like to be in this country and born to fairly North American poor parents and have to make it on my own and have to support my family and go to the food banks and still be able to plow through. I could talk to you about that. So again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't work hard and you shouldn't push your kids to do great things. Yeah, we definitely are in a generation that needs that more than ever. But it's the comparison to others. This should be a race against yourself. This shouldn't be a race against other people to kind of see, where you end up and how well you do or how bad you do. And I just hope that parents, before it's too late, before the anxiety kicks in, before your child is on a drug or drinking or doing something to to numb the pain, I pray that you tackle this. And it's not foreign to the church setting. I find it actually, sadly, because I'm in the church settings a lot and in communities a lot, that some of the highest type performers are quote unquote in the Christian world. And I really do hope that stops. I hope that there is a messaging that goes back to who you are fearfully and wonderfully created to be, and that you are made with a loving purpose, and that purpose should not be pushed into what other people think of you, as well as what marks you can get or what house you can buy or the things you achieve. Because as sadly, I'll say it straight up, a lot of the parents that I have been connecting with over the past 10 years, they seem to want things over relationship with their kids. It's much easier to be miserable. It's much easier. There's not much energy that needs to be put towards being a frustrated person or having some guile. But there is a lot more energy it takes to put good effort in, to be a relational parent, to be a person who actually takes the time to spend time with their kids. I'm telling you, it drives me nuts how children are just a trophy in a lot of people's trophy cases these days. And I hope that this reaches a parent tonight or whenever you're watching this, for you to stop this, the madness, the trajectory that they're on. Pull them out of some of the different classes they're in, or the different modules that they are continuous education or hockey or whatever it might be, and just spend time with them, whether or not they want to spend time with you or not. Because let's face it, a lot of kids don't want to spend time with their folks, and that has been set up since the beginning because the parents didn't set that up as something that they wanted to do. And the kids, have no time for their parents. And don't get me wrong, my talk is cheap. I've only got 3 kids under 5 right now, 3 kids under 4.5. So I can't really speak into what it's going to be like to be a teenager in the 2030, decade. But I can say that from all of the good relationships that I've seen and parent situations that I've been a part of, if you're willing to give that metrics over time, you're not going to be going around comparing, because you're going to hear the heart of your child and you're going to see that they have a lot more to offer than your own pride and your own notch on your belt. You'll start to see a human being that is mimicking everything you're doing. There is another interesting point that was brought up to me by another father, and he told me that in his pursuit of making life easier for his children, he ended up modeling what he didn't want them to do. He worked very hard so that they wouldn't be stressed out. He worked very hard so that they would have a bit of an easier road. There is nothing wrong, of course, with kids going through heartaches and hardships and trials and tribulations. In fact, when we hinder them from going through those things, that's when, other problems arise. And usually it's in an indirect way where the children are actually watching their parents crush themselves under this extreme pressure and weight, and then sadly they compare themselves to their parents and end up doing the exact same thing and or worse. And I'm not blaming anyone who's going through that, because that is just a tough situation where you're just trying to do your best. And this gentleman is a wonderful, wonderful person and friend. But, he's recognized that instead of, just spending the time with them and talking to them and working through things and, not putting undue pressure. Again, he wasn't even trying to put pressure, but he created a competitive and a comparison type lifestyle within his own world, because he admittedly says that there's a lot of comparison that goes on in his own world. So of course, the way the kids are going to truly, act is they're going to replicate the examples that are put in front of them. So, here as I land the plane, or I start slowing down to pull this thing into the parking lot, I just want to wrap up in a few quick ways and say that, if you have kids or people in your life that you can, really nurture, speak into, or you're starting to see them go down maybe a bit of a bad road, stop the things that you're doing and just, spend time with them. They want your time. They want you. You are the representation of God in their lives, probably into their teens to mid-20s. And they are going to look at your life and your template. And the things that you do, the things that you say, are going to affect them greatly. And block out the other voices in your own life, in your own mind, in your own head. Block out the voices that are going to compare your children with other children. It's not good. It's not healthy. And whether or not you think your kids are actually going to hear it or understand it or see it, because of like the actual visual representation on our little magic triangles, you don't have to worry about that, because if you're not watching that stuff, it won't show up because you won't have to show that pressure. But if you are, it doesn't matter if you take those screens away or not, they're going to feel it on you. You are still, and in most cases, are going to be the most important person in their life for the first 20 to 30 years, and those are formative years in their lives. And lastly, just for yourself, stop comparing with other people. Just relax. Be okay with who you are, with who God made you to be. Life is going to come and go, and it's going to start coming a lot faster, and it's going to start going a lot quicker than you anticipated. And that's okay, because you're resting in who God has said you are, and who you need to be. And hopefully that'll translate to the kiddos in your life, whether you're an aunt or an uncle, or whether you're a guardian or a parent. Take the time, spend time with those young ones in your life. Stop the comparison in your own life and in their life, and just enjoy, the time you have together, because that time will never come back. Just want to say thank you again for watching and spending the time with me today, and I hope it helped on some level. If you have any comments or questions, please drop it in the comments section below. If you'd like to watch any other videos in my Dad's Doing Dishes playlist here, you could take a look at this playlist here, the video here. If you'd like to subscribe and like, I would greatly appreciate it. Do that here. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I'm Stephen Tocher. Have yourself a wonderful day, evening, morning, or night. God bless.